Hi there, it's Jeff here with an Edexcel 25-mark essay question on monopsony power applied to the supermarkets. So here's the context then. Major supermarkets have been criticised for exerting strong bargaining power over farmers and other suppliers. Indeed, the Groceries Code Adjudicator, the regulator, found a couple of years ago that some suppliers were being paid below cost. So here's the 25-mark question. Evaluate the extent to which monopsony power distorts market outcomes using the supermarket industry or an industry of your choice. Well, we'll look at supermarkets. So here's my first KAA paragraph. In theory, I quite like that phrase, it invites some analysis. Monopsony power allows dominant buyers to pay prices below the competitive equilibrium, reducing allocative efficiency. And then I bring in some application. The big four, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrisons, although Asda has now been overtaken by Aldi, control around 66% of market share, giving them substantial monopsony or buying power over suppliers such as farmers and food manufacturers. And this causes prices received by suppliers to fall closer to or even below their average variable cost, potentially pushing them to the shutdown point where it's no longer commercially viable to carry on producing. For instance, dairy farmers have reported being paid under 30p per litre of milk, while the average cost of milk is above that. As a result, some small-scale producers might leave the market, thereby reducing competition and long-term productive capacity. Consumers may then also suffer a loss of choice. So there are some of the downsides of monopsony power. However, these effects depend on if and how supermarkets actually utilise their monopsony gains. If lower input prices for things like milk and flour and coffee and cocoa are passed on to consumers via reduced retail prices, for example processed foods, then consumer surplus may actually increase along with their real purchasing power. And the big supermarkets, such as Tesco and the deep discounters Aldi and Lidl, misspelt there, enjoy significant internal economies of scale through bulk buying and distribution and logistics. So again, the big supermarkets are achieving economies of scale, and consumers can benefit if scale economies and intense competition helps keep prices down, particularly groceries. Now I'm going to show you the diagram in a few minutes. The effect of this is shown in my diagram, where monopsony power brings down average and marginal cost and leads to a fall in the profit maximising price and an expansion of demand. And if prices fall, that can help families, particularly families on below average incomes, who have certainly suffered greatly during the cost of living crisis as the price of their weekly food bill has gone up. So here's a monopsony diagram. The normal profit maximising price is a P1 and output Q1, but if you have monopsony power, then that can bring down the average and marginal costs for firms. I've basically assumed here that, by the way, the cost of supply is constant at each level of output. What we're really focusing on here is the actual cost of supply, and monopsony is a way of bringing down those costs. As a result, it leads to a higher profit maximising output and a lower equilibrium price. So it goes down from P1 to P2. We move down the demand curve from B to C, and this leads to increases in total supernormal profits. So consumers get the benefit of lower prices, and obviously monopsony gets the benefit of higher profits. And if prices are lower because of monopsony power, then there will be an expansion of demand and an increase in consumer surplus from ABP1 to ACP2. And I could have put that labelled area into the text of my answer. Second argument against monopsony in terms of distorting welfare and efficiency is that it can reduce the quality, the variety and the ethical standards of goods. As suppliers are forced to accept lower prices, they may themselves cut costs by using lower quality inputs, maybe employing fewer workers, or not being able to afford sustainable farm practices. And indeed, there is some evidence that some supermarket suppliers in the UK have cut labour costs by underpaying workers and compromising on occasions on environmental standards. So this causes harm to consumer welfare, because even if you have lower prices, the product quality and the ethical production deteriorate. Consumer sovereignty is eroded. The range of available choice no longer reflects the full preferences of ethically or environmentally conscious buyers. And of course, there are knock-on effects for wages and incomes of people in countries from which products are sourced. However, Nevertheless is another word you can use. There is now much more consumer awareness, so people consider not just the price they pay, but also aspects such as food miles and animal welfare standards. And some supermarkets have been successful, like Waitrose and the Fair Trade Foundation, in growing the range and sales of ethically branded products, despite obviously paying higher prices. Sainsbury's and Tesco having to promote more sustainable sourcing and transparent supply chains. And actually the point I'm making here is that these supermarkets, they have a long-term interest in keeping and building and sustaining good commercial relationships with farmers and other suppliers. Lots of consumers like to know where their milk comes from or their beef. Okay? In fact, there are mutually beneficial gains from having good supermarket farmer relationships, which the theory of monopsony tends to ignore. So 5-paragraph answer, 2 KAA points, 2 evaluation points, and then you finish off, if you have time, hopefully with a final reasoned judgment. The degree to which monopsony power distorts outcomes depends on how retailers balance cost-cutting with investment and ethical responsibility, and also the intervention and the power of the Groceries Code Adjudicator designed to investigate these issues. We tend to assume that most of the benefits of monopsony flow to businesses with buying power. But suppliers such as farmers also have the potential to form cooperatives to help them negotiate a better price. And I think Arla Foods in the UK is a really good example of that, not just milk, but related products such as cheese and yoghurt. Milk producers have come together to improve their profitability in recent years. Or, of course, if they think they're getting a raw deal from the supermarkets, they might use e-commerce to sell products direct to consumers and miss out supermarkets altogether. A lot of artisan businesses tend to do that. My final sentence is my final bit of the essay. The case against monopsony is not clear-cut. Well, I hope you got some value from going through this essay. Again, it's 5 paragraphs, supporting diagram, where possible some application, but the key is to write in context, and I chose the supermarket sector. Thanks for joining in. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, consider giving it a like, subscribe to the channel. Good luck with revision, and see you soon.